I like to start my binding in this lower left hand corner because this is an area where your eye doesn't really pick up much. So when I add my binding all the way around this quilt and come to join it here, if I don't do this so well, you won't notice it as much. I like to leave about 9 to 10 inches free so that when I get to this point and I have to join this edge to the other part of the binding, I have room to work with. So just leave that tail free. I'm going to start sewing about right here, and I will sew 1/4 of an inch over. I like to lock my stitch. I'll use a regular stitch length. You can use either your walking foot or your just a regular foot, whichever you prefer. So I'm going to stitch into this corner, and I will stop 1/4 of an inch away from the edge, and I'll back stitch. So let me take this over to the machine to show you what that looks like. So I've taken this out of the sewing machine. I've sewn from here to here. Take your binding and fold it back. This fold needs to be in line with the edge of your quilt. You'll notice there's a 45-degree angle here. As soon as that lines up, you need to then bring this forward and line up with this edge. The fold needs to line up with the top. So let me do that again. You're going to take your quilt out of the machine, make sure that stitch is locked, fold the binding up in this direction, make sure this is lined up. You'll get a 45-degree angle there, and then fold the binding back down. When you fold the binding back down, make sure that this is lined up, and make sure that this fold up here is even with this edge of your quilt. And when you've done this, you can pin it or just hold on tight and take it over to the sewing machine. I'm going to start sewing on the edge here, lock my stitches, and then continue down 1/4 of an inch all the way till I get to the next corner. The binding has been sewn all the way around the quilt, and I'm ready to join these two ends together. I lay it flat, lay each one flat, and then I've marked where this one meets the other one. Since I need to sew these two together, if I just cut that where I've marked it, I wouldn't have any seam allowance. So I need to add 1/4 inch seam allowance in order to sew them together. I can't add any more to this, so I'm going to have to put 1/4 of an inch plus this 1/4 of an inch onto this end. So that means I'm going to add 1/2 of an inch to this edge. So I've taken that mark and I've drawn a 45-degree angle. And just to remind you what that looks like, I take my ruler, I find the 45-degree line, and I line that up with the edge, and then I mark that line. The reason why I need a 45-degree angle is because I have to join it to this side. Now let's add the 1/2 of an inch. So the 1/2 of an inch line on my ruler is right where these numbers are. The line that goes through those numbers. Oh, let's get that over the top. And now I'm ready to mark that. I don't like to cut this until I've double checked, because a number of times I've marked it on this side and cut, and then I'm in trouble. So let's see how that's going to work out. I lay this down flat And I lay this one down flat, and I see that's where they're marked, and then this is going to be the extra seam allowance. So I can either take this to my rotary mat and cut it, or I just prefer to use a pair of scissors to cut that off. So let me cut that and get rid of this. Now I'm ready to join these two pieces together. I have to pin it before I take it to my sewing machine. And this is why I need this extra in here, so I can get in here to sort of move these around. Now I apologize, this isn't the best material to show you put right sides together, but the right side is on the outside of this fabric on each one of those, so the right sides need to go together. And I'm going to cross them like this, and remember to make that 45-degree sewing line. I have to do it at an angle. So let's get in here and put those together like so and pin it. And let me explain to you why I'm not pinning on the edge here. But first, let's get this pinned. So if I were to line this up with the end of this, what would happen would be when I'd open it up, it would be off by about 1/4 inch. So when you're sewing seams on the diagonal like this, it needs to be offset a little. And the distance, how do I know how to offset it? The distance from here to here should be about 1/4 inch. And when I go to sew, I'm going to sew right down this line. So let me take that to the sewing machine and I'll show you what it looks like. So I've sewn this together. And you'll notice I have some ears or little things from where that seam met that I need to clip off. I also need to erase this line. Since this line is going on the inside, I don't need to worry about that, but the line that was on this side I've erased. And I wanted to mention I did use this dark thread. I probably would use more of a matching or lighter thread because, as you can see, my seams showing a little here. So now I'm ready to stitch this by hand, and I'm just going to flip this over. Some people can do this by machine, but I have a hard time doing that. So I just have a needle and thread. I like to hide my knot in that seam allowance. And there's a couple of ways of stitching this. If you're worried that your stitches are going to show, you can use an applique stitch, or if you're not worried, you can use like a whip stitch to sew that. Some people like to pin it when they go around, or there's special clips for this, but I usually just work my way down using my fingers to hold that back. Now, let me put this here and show you what happens in the corners. When you get to the corner and you've been stitching this around like so, you're going to get to the corner, and I have this stitch. I stitch right into the corner there, and you'll notice there's going to be this nice 45-degree angle that you can just flip over. And at this point I usually need a pin for right there. Let's see. Do a little bit better job maybe. But flip it over, and there's my mitered corner on that side, and if you notice, it's like magic, there's a mitered corner on this side. After you finish stitching that down, you will have completed the Advent quilt. The last thing to do is to add a sleeve if you'd like, or to add buttons onto the hands.